Welcome to the Between Two Panels podcast, where Ryan and Sean will discuss the independent comic making process from the writing to the art, finding a printer, crowdfunding, publishers, and comic conventions, and any and all stops in between. Also featuring some of the best and brightest creators on the indie scene today. Okay, when Ryan and I were kicking around who should be our very first guest, the list consisted of one and only one guy. Work draws heavy comparison to Andrew McLean, and rightfully so. He is known from his very own comic heavy and from badass works such as Deathslinger, Kayfabe, The Death of a Super, Immortalis, and things are buzzing about his upcoming works on the naughty list, as well as a bootleg homage, I love saying that word, homage, to RoboCop and Predator. The man gets his mail in Portland, Oregon, but let's be honest, when he's making his art, that's where he lives because he puts his heart and soul into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ben Perkins.
Hey, hello.
Ben. Hello. Thanks for coming on, man. You're our very first guest.
I don't
very
think
first
I deserve
one.
such a great intro. I mean, thank you so much.
You, well, it's heartfelt, like I said, dude. You're just a solid guy. So,
thank you. Appreciate that.
So let's talk about the upcoming stuff, man. Super excited about that. I mean, yeah, we've been kicking around talking a little bit about the RoboCop versus Predator thing because of licenses, copyright, all that stuff. So if you want to talk about that,
yeah, we can talk about that. It was Andrew K-Hack hit me up. I can't remember how, man, and like shout out to him first of all. Thank you for your patience, Andrew. I'm trying to get it done. Life just sucks, man. But it's time. Yeah, but it'll get done. Anyway, I think I want to say about a year, maybe a little bit more than that. I think we might be coming up on 2, but I really don't want to say that.
Oh, yeah.
Then I'll start feeling really bad. But I know it was this probably a year ago. He hit me up and he had this script that he sent me, and I think it was, I can't remember how, I think it was small. I remember the page number being kind of tight. I can't actually, you have to go back and remember that. But I think that what I wanted to do is beef it up and like just make it the whole idea is like a title fight, right?
Okay.
Like Titan versus Titan. It's like kind of like that. That's at least from my perspective where I was going with it. As far as if we're gonna do it, like I didn't want to do the thing where like you have the two characters that misunderstanding, conflict battle.
Oh yeah.
We're over this. We're looking for the same thing, and I mean, how are you gonna do that with an alien hunter and a robot policeman? So I figured that it would just be the whole story would just a fight. And Andrew came up with a great script. I mean, probably one of the best scripts I've ever read. Shout out to him. Not only in like content, but structure. The structure of it was just so. It was one of those where it's like detailed out. Everything has its tier, and you're like, and that's a lot of freaking work, to be honest with you. All that in track. I mean, but he had down to like what the caption words were going to be, the sound effects, like just everything. It was awesome. Like just laid in. It was so great. So, and Shane has great scripts as well. But Andrew, like great script stuff. The first thing I said, because what happened was you start understanding the structure, and then it just becomes so easy just to kind of like skim and read, and then when you're stuck on something, you can go back and easily find it because of where it sits in the script, right?
Because it's so detailed, right? And so
because he did the work, and that's a credit that I don't have that kind of patience or motivation to do that. But he does, and he did it, and it was a great script. So it's immediately inspired, and I just started hacking it away. I came up, I think we were at, I want to say 20-something pages. I have to go and look for check, but basically it's a nice average size issue with the whole thing's like,
yep,
and it's sprinkled in to like the way it realistically kind of comes about of why these two characters would be facing each other. The thing that I was just kind of came across too, and I don't know how it came up. I don't know if he had already written the script or if we had joked about it. Or I think it might have been actually too the Kayfabe video.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I can't remember how long ago that was, but they mentioned, I think it was either a RoboCop or a Predator issue they were looking at. They said at one point Dark Horse held the license for both these characters, and they never did anything with them.
Right.
So it's like, okay, well maybe, and so then that was the other impetus is like I wanted to try and make like a little throwbacky, maybe to like a classic 90s. My style is usually kind of, I guess it's consistent, but I usually think it's all over the place because I'm trying to do different things with different books. So I got a marker brush set.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying about with the using different materials and stuff, right? Like that, like different paper, different inks. But I mean, so this is so funny. That's the badass cover for Death Slinger, right? That's freaking awesome. And I remember you talking about how you had to do each like shell casing and it was just time consuming, but that is a beautiful cover. But if I sit down with 10 different artists and yours was one of them, I think I could pick it out because you have a very, very transitional style that you can make fit anything. You know what I mean?
I think so too, and
Yeah.
that's kind of like what I want to do. I want to be able to, I grew up. Well, I didn't say grow up, but I think after I moved out here when I was around 20,
Yeah.
I was really into Frank Miller. So a lot of my stuff was just like stark black.
Oh, that's
And
why you're my dude. I Daredevil Frank Miller's that's the beginning and the end for me.
yeah, I started with Sin City,
Oh, okay.
weirdly enough, and then I backtracked to Daredevil in his
Oh,
time with
okay.
Sin, and I was re-inspired. And then you see the stuff that
Ah,
he did for Dark Knight Returns, and you're like, "What the hell's going on?" This again, so that's kind of was my. He's like my goat, right? Like
yeah,
he, I
for
mean,
sure. Same here.
if I had one single creator that I could point to that kind of painted everything that I do, it's
Yes.
him because he's so versatile. And
Yes.
Ronin was a big, huge, eye-opening experience for me. I mean, if that exploded my brain, I was like, okay, you don't have to just be a Kirby or
Yes.
whatever. Like you can evolve, and like maybe I was young when I thought that, and later I'm like, okay, well, all these artists I've seen evolve and change and all that.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't more like for me evolving to change into like the best version of my style I could make it. It was more like what fits the tone of the story.
Yes.
With RoboCop, with the Versus book, I just wanted to be like kind of a throwbacky. With
Yeah.
Death Slinger, I wanted it to kind of feel like something nobody's seen before, but that's really hard to do because everything's been seen kind of. So I wanted to make it look like it was an Image book, but even more indie than Image
Right.
in a way,
Yeah.
and a little bit more like almost like a Kamiko or something. But I don't know, stuff like that. Just something that it's not nostalgia necessarily, but it's more like just I don't know. I'm just talking gibberish now.
No, no, no. You make a good point because I agree. I think you're right that everything's been done under the sun. You know what I mean? It's all been done before, but how do you find a way to put your own spin on it to kind of change it to make it your own? And that's I
How
think
do
a
I
lot of
see
people
it?
get hung up on that. They see, oh, it's already been done. Well, put your own spin on it and do it anyways. You know what I mean? And
That's
that's
exactly correct. No one's seen it the way I see it.
right.
That's kind of
That's
like how
exactly
I
right.
approach it.
Yeah. And that's the thing about art. I love about art is because and working with you, like I'd give you a page and I'd have it in my mind what that page would look like. And you'd get that from the page, but you'd put your own spin on it, which is just great to me. And I couldn't draw, stick figures right. You know what I mean? And that's why I think a
I've
good
always wanted
artist,
this. As a writer who sends those pages out, when you get them back, is it more? Do you get more of a throw when it's close to what you saw in your head, or do you get it more when it's like something that you haven't thought of before?
I think a little bit of both, right? Because
That's fair.
and you see my scripts, I don't try and over detail. I do like to put how the panels go, the sequencing and that kind of thing. Because like you're saying with Shane Berryhill, there's writing comics, then there's writing good comics, then there's writing comics that make sense where you're thinking about what goes panel to panel and when the reader turns the page, that kind of thing. There's a lot of detail in that. But I like to leave a lot of detail up to the artist. Like you. I mean, dude, that issue 3 of Immortalis was just it was bang. And that's
Oh, thanks.
one of my favorite pages. I always try to use that scene you did with Hyde picking up the lid to like smash Tam. That is like one of my favorite panels, and I try to put that in all our media and stuff because I
Oh,
just
yeah.
love that panel, man. And that's just one panel out of a whole book. You know what
Right.
I mean?
And
So
like the
yeah,
cool the payoff. I like the payoff comes when you turn the page, which is great.
yes,
So
yes, that was the bottom panel, and yep, that was great.
it was
Yeah, for sure.
that was the one of the funner books. I mean, I was sweating that book too because I
Ah,
remember
we
just
put a
like
rush on you, dude.
was that what it was? Because I was like, man, I don't feel like this is crap.
No, it was really good. And like I said, to be honest, it just wasn't the art style we wanted for that book. But man, I
Fair.
always wanted to get
That's a
back
big
working
thing
with
about
you.
my
And
art too, is that I mean I've worked with guys and we've had great relationships. I did a whole issue for this guy for it's called the Stonebinder Chronicles, and he was into it, and then he found another artist that he fit better.
yeah,
I worked with Nate Corey, who was I think he was on the first circuit of fighting or
yeah, I
whatever.
remember
He's an
Nate Quarry. Yeah, the
rock.
Ultimate Fighter. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, through happenstance, I got to meet that guy and hang out with him for like a couple months,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
he's got a book out called Zombie Cage Fighter,
Okay.
He went with another artist, but it was me at first, and it was
Yeah.
great. He liked my style, he liked how I did everything, but he just did not like how I was drawing his girlfriend. It was like the in the book, because it's like it's kind of based on his life a little bit. It's about a guy who
Yeah.
has to
That
fight,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, to like help his daughter, but the only thing he can do is fight zombies, and then
Ah,
there's a whole thing at the end. I was really into it. I was really invested emotionally to the book because it was like a father daughter story, which
that's
is
awesome.
father son, father daughter stuff. I'm a father,
Yeah.
son, and a daughter, so
Right.
all that kind of stuff hits. And I was like, oh yeah, because he's making the ultimate sacrifice in a way, and in more ways than one when you get to the end of the story.
Yeah.
Not to try and blow up his book, whatever. But anyway, so like the whole thing was great. I thought that was gonna be my in, right? Because like I'm talking
Yes.
to a guy he's tops in one circuit. He's a super cool guy. He could pay for the book. He didn't like how I drew women, so he had me come up and talk to Randy Bowen, who was the sculptor back in the day, about how to
Oh my
draw
gosh.
girls. He talked to me for like 10 minutes, and he was like, "Yeah, just you know what you're doing. Like, obviously, you're gonna have to push your style a little bit more to help him to what he wants, but whatever."
Yes.
And then he was moving into his house, so I spent a half a day at Randy Bowen's new house just looking at all his original artwork from like
Oh wow.
Crumb, Frazetta, Mignola. I'm like, okay, well, this isn't that bad. Anyways, long story long, is that he went with another artist. It was really kind of one of those sad situations where I thought we could actually continue to be friends.
Yeah.
And then he listened, yeah, I sent up a couple of emails through the couple of years, like, hey man, but some at a con, no bad words. And look, the book, it looks great. He
Yeah.
chose the perfect artist for that book.
Yeah.
The only thing that really stung was that he was on an episode of Comic Book Men to promote that book and sell it at the Secret Stash.
Yeah.
And he was going to show Kevin when the whole thing was done again what it looked like. So I was like 1 degree away from Kevin Smith seeing my artwork. And who knows if that would have jazzed him up to want to do something. You never know, like where people find you.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
the whole thing.
Yes.
Like exposure is great, but for that reason. But if you get paid, so I get paid, so I'm happy. It
There
was a
you go.
great job.
Well, and
Yeah,
you're
it's
so
very
right.
inspiring.
A lot of people put too much into one project, not understanding that you can make the greatest thing in the world, but if it's not the right time and the right people don't see it, I mean, your odds of being successful are cut in third just by that fact, plus other
Well,
things that impact it. So,
comics now, I'm not a historian. I only know from what I've read or seen, but like it
yeah,
seems like there's a huge saturation for people that want to do it now. Just kind of like with filmmaking and all
dude,
this kind of stuff.
100%.
Now it's almost doubly, triply hard to kind of make a name for yourself. I keep joking
Yes.
with my girlfriend that like I should have been 20 when I was in the 1985.
Yes.
I think that would have been where I could have hit fucking hard. Like I
Right.
really
Right.
think so. But maybe that's me being grandiose. But knowing
Oh,
what,
no,
what I know about it, I think today it's just super hard. Like I mean,
dude.
that Slinger is a great book. You couldn't get a lot of people to latch on. So hopefully, through word
Right.
of mouth and like the success of what it does from there, hopefully you can grow from it.
Yeah. I think you're 100% right. I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Because now anybody who has an idea, either going through Reddit, Discord, whatever it is, or just however to find Facebook, find an artist to work with you, whether you pay them, however that works, right? That with Kickstarter and Indiegogo and and you could go publish with Print Ninja or somebody else 20 issues of your book just to have it printed and just say you did it. You know what I mean? It's so easy
Well,
now,
and that's a
but
different thing too.
it's
Now,
glutted.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep
Oh,
finish your thought.
I was just going to say the whole market is you're right. It's glutted. It's a great thing that everybody can put out whatever they want, but there's just so much out there to go through to find something good.
There's a two-pronged effect that I've seen that happens with it. Now, one's a more art thing, and the other is kind of more of a commerce thing. Publishers aren't taking those; they aren't doing page rates anymore, or anything like that. Like
Yeah.
the self-publishing is such a viable form now that they're not willing to put that investment in somebody. And that's why you see a lot of these publishers; they're not really getting new people in.
Yeah.
It's all just rotation of the same old, same old.
Yeah.
Which so I don't know how they find these new people. I mean, DC for a long time ago stopped collecting submissions
Yeah.
for new artists and stuff. So I don't
Yeah.
know how they find new artists. Marvel, it's hard to get in touch with them. I'm not saying I want to work for those big two, but even with Dark Horse,
Yeah.
like I have to have a whole thing kind of almost half completed and work for free, no
Yes.
advance to get a book, and then try to sell it on the back end, which
No, you're 100%
not
right.
viable for me. I can't do that,
Yeah.
especially if I want to
No.
make a 300-page book. So the other prong is, since anyone can do it, I spent my whole life, art career wise, trying to make really concise, put together, well composed images, right?
Yes.
And that's like, And like, there's a certain amount of cartooning, but it's all like super refined. Everyone tells me my work's so clean, which in
Yes.
my head, I don't. I feel like I don't want it to be that clean. But now I see like you can just kind of do really loose, really kind of like avant-garde, almost impressionistic kind of style
Right.
that doesn't have all of that, and it's a hit. And I'm like, that's good for those people, but like my art seems to be kind of less desired in that regard, only for maybe specific people that kind of know what goes into it and they can appreciate that craft.
Yes. Yeah. Only
Which I'm
artists
not
know
trying
what
to
artists go
other.
through.
I don't want to. I'm not trying to slam other art.
No, no.
I appreciate it on its own level, but I just see like I've worked like almost 40 years to kind of get to where I'm at, and then like, oh, am I working too hard? Is that what I keep asking myself? Am I working too hard? And as a cartoonist, we're already taking fucking cuts and making shortcuts and breaks.
I
So like,
know.
after I work less.
100, and you're right. I mean, it's like you take all this time that you took to hone your style, and then somebody comes along with a scratch style, and it's the new, and it gets picked up, and you're like, who did you know? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
So I might have taken them 20, 30, 40 years to get to that
That's true
place,
too.
which
Yep.
is totally fair. I'm not, like I said, I don't want to ever try to diminish anybody who's making the art that they make,
Yes.
but I'm talking about more the trend is I think it's accessible and people see themselves in it. But oh, I could do that. I think there's some sort of like relationship that's pre-established for
Yeah,
that.
I never even thought about that. That's a good point. They see
I think it's
something
all
more like, oh, I could
psychological.
do that, and that's a good point. I
Yeah,
never thought
that's
about that.
there. I think charming. I think it's charm. Like when you see a lot of charm
Yeah.
in art. And
Yeah.
sometimes my art, I don't know how people see my artwork. I can only recall like how it affects me. I just always want it to be better or different than what I did. I
Yeah.
was talking to days like you don't know how to make a film until you're done making it. And same thing is with a comic. You don't know how to make a comic until it's done. And so sometimes I go back and I'm like, ah. But that's the life of me as a cartoonist. I try to be fast. I turn them and burn them. I get bored easily. So once it's done, it's done. It exists. It's in the world.
Yeah.
Have fun.
No, I understand. Hey, so you said you moved to Portland when you were 20, is that correct?
Yeah, I was 19 this summer before I turned 20. So it was like with the difference of 3 months.
Okay. Well, give me my Ben Perkins origin story here about how you started moving to
Oh,
Oregon,
okay.
becoming an artist, that kind of thing.
Well, I remember drawing with Crayola crayons and markers and stuff when I was super, super young. I'm from Vermont, really, a little town
Okay.
in the Northeast Kingdom, Caledonia County, right next to Connecticut River called St. Johnsbury. And it's a quaint little town, very, very small. A lot of winter snows and stuff. And so, yeah, I think the first thing I remember drawing was like ET with markers. My mom thought was really great.
Uh,
And then I just kept doing it. Kids doodle. A lot of kids phase out of it. I think people just kept saying, "Oh, that's really good. Oh, that's really good. Oh, wow, that's neat." Right. And I think that kind of fostered that where what lane I was going to be traveling in.
right.
Because I can get some praise from this. I come from a broken home. I come from a really screwed up background and a lot of trauma, like probably every other stand up comic and comic artist out there. So, like I get it. So yeah, so I found the lane of praise that fit me, and I just kind of developed it. Comics was something that kind of fluttered in and out. I first liked animation, is
Yeah.
where I was like, oh, I want to do cartoons, like because that's all I consumed as a kid. Like, my mom like broke my mind when I think it was like Snorks I was watching. I'm like, how can they breathe underwater? And she's like, they're not even alive. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're not alive. And she's like, someone does drawings and they make. And I'm like, what? I draw, so it means I could do that, right? That's the whole thing. Then I found out it was way too hard, and it's hard to do it on your own.
Ah, yeah.
And once you do become an animator, you're kind of like a cog in a machine as well. So I like for some reason, I think both are in my kind of orbit. So I just gravitated towards comics, and then just reading the material and just being really moved by comics. When I decided I wanted to make comics, it was it was in eighth grade. I had to do a English report on some sort of prose, and so the Deathlock miniseries came up by Marvel. Like, was it Butch Geist or I can't remember what artist it was. I think I might be screwing that up, but a really good artist anyway. And it was all like kind of painted with like colored pencil. It was amazing, right?
Right.
Um, but I remember the moment where it was Death Clock. He dresses in like a fedora and stuff to go see his family again after he's like been put inside the brain of this machine. And the family freaks out and stuff, which was replicated in Spawn, by the way. At the time, I finally took that from Deathlock. Anyway, that hit me. I was like, oh, that's crazy. And I just kind of like doing that report and just seeing like people make comics and I could write and draw. And it was just all this kind of perfect storm of like, the turtles were kind of big for me and I was
Yeah.
really into that. And so like just the perfect storm of like, oh, I could just make comics. And then that's kind of my pursuit started there. And so then I went up through high school. I got into the art program there, and then I got taken on the wing of my art teacher, my sophomore year, Mr. Golden, who everybody my first year was like, "Oh, Mr. Golden will love you. Mr. Golden's gonna love you."
Yeah.
And he's like this big, huge, 7 foot tall dude out of the Bronx, New York, who wanted to be a basketball player, but ended up being a small rural high school, and he was like the biggest personality in town. And so yeah, he took me under his wing. I learned so much from him, and then I went off to college, did a couple of state colleges on the East Coast. Then my friend's like, "Hey, there's an art college out here in Portland." He used to live in Vermont, and he moved out a year prior. And he's like, "You should come out. You should apply if you get accepted. I got a spare room for you. You can come out, hang out with me until you get on your feet, and blah blah blah." And that's pretty much the start. Failed out. I didn't really fail out. I think I just kind of like money wise back the next year, and it was more like, okay, well, I guess I got a full time job now, and then just kind of pluck away at honing the craft. And I met up with some dudes after I had kids that were making comics, and he was a writer, and then that's kind of like how it started. I've been working with one guy, my best friend Aaron Stewart, on Galaxy Gator. It's been a minute since we've worked on it. I don't know what he's doing. It's kind of like we did a huge run. We did like 6 issues, made a trade paperback. GalaxyGator.net if anyone's interested. But it's like an anthropomorphic, Gator comic, and yeah, and it's pretty much from there. It was kind of like people joke about underground comics.
Yeah.
Oh, I joke I have subterranean comics because like I've done a lot of comics that will not see the light of day. I've done work for lawyers, I've done work for accountants, I've done work for. It's pretty much like a have gun will travel kind of thing. Like I've got a pen, I'll do your comic, and they would have like however much it would cost to make that particular comic, and I was usually doing dirt cheap page rates because that's how I was making my living for a long time. I was just making $100 at a time, here and there. Yeah, and then I hooked up with a guy, and I did 7 years in the book Post Traumatic, which is in a book. It's on Amazon, but it's like a third of the content that I made for that book, which is kind of again breaks my heart. There's so much stuff out there that's really really well done comics,
right?
That people won't see that I'm super proud of. But here's the other edge of that sword. Now that I have more kind of cool projects coming in, I can take all the stuff that I learned from those and apply it because my growth was ridiculously huge during that time. Like way better cartoonist, a more thoughtful comic book storyteller, just a better draftsman. So it's still fun. It's still fun. I get jazzed.
Hey,
every project. Anyway, yeah.
As long as you're enjoying it. So do you think your big first kind of success, one that got out there more in the wild, more than anything else, was that Heavy, or what's your thoughts on that? Was that?
Well, Heavy is a very crazy story. Heavy's got its own story. That's what I'll tell you. Heavy started just as an idea. I was hanging out with an old roommate of mine at my new house, having kids, and we used to have all these sayings like a side of rice, salsa shark, all this kind of stupid bullshit. And we used to say something about we used to talk about dropping the heavy horse, which is just like kicking your ass. Like, don't make me drop the heavy horse on you, like lay down the law.
Right.
And I forgot all about that. And he said it to me, and I just, for some reason, I just saw this horse's head coming out of the shadows into like pools of light, and just like a real mean, like, I'm the heavy horse, right? Then I just decided to, why don't I make it a guy? I think him and I were talking about making it a horse that lives on a farm and just is like lazy and takes mushrooms and shit. And he's just a real horse. He's a real horse.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not about that. So then my first question, I was in my Frank Miller phase, so I had to make him a private investigator or like a bodyguard or like an ex-boxer. He became all sorts of shit. He became at one point it was he didn't know if he was a horse or not, and he couldn't trust his world, and like it was all like the sci-fi Blade Runner, like cyberpunk crap. He came off all these iterations. Thing is, I would post drawings that got me inspired on DeviantArt, and he got tremendous feedback. People, I love Heavy. People love this character. And I hadn't a single thing that he had done. I was just showing images, and people were like filling it in. The big break was when I had a comic book. I had a gallery showing at an art. I was working at a gallery, did paintings and stuff, and we just did a whole show, and it was just huge paintings of like different things that Heavy was doing. I wanted to tell a story, but it would mean that the curator gave up his ability to be able to place the paintings any way he wanted.
Oh yeah.
So you couldn't go through chronologically in a way. So I was like, okay, well, let's make every event a night in his life. Like, people sometimes have to go through the park to get milk at night. This guy's busting Rock'em Sock'em Robots, right? Like, that was the whole game.
Right.
So that developed from there, and I was just realized that like I could take everything that I've created for Heavy and mash it into. I needed to use every piece. The only way I could do that was just to come up with the idea that he was immortal, and then that's kind
Yes.
of like the string. Once I got to that idea, I still couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So I decided to tell the last story. Here's a tip: if you ever get stuck on how to write a story, my thing is, it's always interesting to write the last story because then you can thread in
Write
everything
the
that came
ending and
before it
yeah, and work backwards.
and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
make it important. So I decided I said against because I don't really like post-apocalyptic stories, but I had to do it that way. I'm like,
Right.
so I made it like a western, and I asked my friend Aaron, my good friend Aaron, I was like, "Do you think that if I made it like a post-apocalyptic like western, that would be?" He goes, "Yeah, it makes sense. He's a fucking horse." I was like, "Okay, yeah, right. Let's do it, right." And so then it was me then backpedaling and looking over the past 12 years of work I put into the character to figure out what I'm gonna do. So yes, I had a lot of people interested right when I dropped that prologue issue for the Kickstarter.
Right.
And a lot of people bought into it. It was great. I'm probably going to use maybe like 20% of that when I redo it.
Nice.
I decided the only thing I hate about that first issue is that it takes so long to get to Heavy. It takes about
Yeah.
11 or maybe 7. To me, it's 11. It takes too long. So I figured get to the Kira faster. So like if I could get if how can I figure out if I could how do I get Heavy on the first page, issue 1? And then so I did it. So now I'm restructuring. It's a 300-page endeavor I'm trying to do. I think once I clear up all the projects for this year, once I hit 2025, I'm going to work on it. Hopefully, by the time my 50th birthday comes around, I'll have it out, and that'll be my present to myself.
There you go. So,
Yeah. So
so
yeah, it's interesting because I want to do a bunch of different things with it. Each issue is going to be like a challenging thing. I want to have like an
right.
all Mad Max issue. I want to have an issue that's like a throwback to his time when he was like a philanthropist, kind of like an Iron Man character. I call him
Gotcha.
Chariot,
Yeah.
which is all horse themed. And if it goes well, I can literally have endless stories I could tell with Heavy. Like I
Right.
like a Fight Club kind of scenario. He's in jail. Like what was it? Was it Undefeated? What was the string of movies, the franchise where the guys go to jail and they have to fight in the underground murder club?
Yeah. Never seen it.
Michael J.
Don't think I've
White
seen it.
was one of those guys. I think it's called Undefeated.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So it's kind of a scenario like that. But anyway,
Right.
I've spoken too much about it. But yeah, Heavy, I think
No,
was
no.
me getting connected with the Cartoonist Cafe Ringside Seeds group. That was like kind of propelled it. I've been in comic communities like in person here in Portland, and they maybe I haven't met the right people, but a lot of them
Yeah.
came up for like they were kind of like a little bit snubby, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
like stuff. I'm pretty gregarious. I'm not saying everybody. There's a lot of great people in the comics community here. They just didn't really seem interested to connect with me. I feel, and I was really kind of like the puppy dog, like, "Hey man, what we doing? You know, what's going on? Like, can we all
Yeah.
get together? Hang out? Let's build this thing, right?" I'm getting that with the community that I've made now. You know,
Yeah.
like Eli, guys like Eli, everybody that's under his umbrella. I know all those guys.
Yeah.
Like Annie and all those guys, very supportive. You know, very connected. Always wanting to push each other up. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
rather than like it was a little different back in the day when I was doing it.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. Yeah. It seems to be a lot more. I think people are a lot more receptive. They're not as focused on their project. They're willing to talk about and put time in other projects, that kind of thing. So yeah.
I
No,
think
I see
age
that.
has something to do with it too. You know, the ego kind of like gets molded a little bit more and softens, and you can be
Yeah.
like you can kind of have the ability to let other people shine in your presence.
Yes, exactly right. So speaking about Heavy, you've been working on it for a while now. Do you ever find when you come back to it and any other time, do you kind of get creative block, or do you ever come back to it and it's like, I don't know what to write about this right now, and then you put it
Well,
aside for a little longer? Or?
Well, for instance, with Heavy in particular, no.
Okay.
That's 300 pages, and I took about 2 days, and I wrote numbers 1 to 300, and I wrote what happens on every page.
Page. Nice.
Yeah, and then I laid out every page, so I know. So I might change that, but it was more of a mental exercise to see. I just need to figure out what it looks like when it's put together, and
Right.
that too, it looks great.
Do
Um,
you ever get writer's block, that kind of thing, when you're drawing, or even your project or anybody else's project? Do you ever run into that, or?
let's see. Sometimes with
Yeah.
Heavy I did, but it wasn't. I had a writing partner that helped me write a script for Heavy to
Ah.
get a comic done. It was called Heart of the Matter. It was a whole thing, very interesting. I'm not going to use any of it, but I had writer's block on that project. I don't really get writer's block that much. I just start writing.
Yeah.
And even if I'm not going to use it, I can go back and change it. So it's easier to change an edited page than to look stare at a blank page. So I'll just
Yeah.
start writing Hell, I'll just start writing a grocery list.
Right.
You know what I mean? Seriously,
No,
random
no,
word. I'll
I'm
start. There we go.
yeah,
Um, I think getting motivated to start the writing is like the biggest hurdle. Like
yeah.
just getting motivated to start anything. Because I will sit here, and like if I got something to write on or draw, it'll just take me so much motivation to get going. And but once I could just start rolling that boulder, then we can start
Yeah.
going, and it's good.
Yeah. 100%
But
understand that because I mean, dude, I'm the same way, and I've told people this over and over. Well, how do you write? I mean, you got to read and you got to write every day. I'm sure as an artist, you got to draw every day, right?
I consume art.
Yeah, yeah, and you sit down, and I told people this. I sit down when I had nothing in my head and I couldn't concentrate, and I'll just start writing. I don't know what to write right now. What am I doing? And all that, and that stream of consciousness just starts working, and suddenly you're in the mood. You find the mood. You know what I mean?
Most of the time, I just hit me like out of the blue. Like it's actually almost the reverse. I'll have an idea and I have nothing to write it down on.
Ah,
And I'm like, I gotta keep this in my head. I have this idea for a comic, very weird, experimental, kind of like more art project than anything else. The
right.
premise of the story is you have two people that had to take a sick girl and then an object that they're transporting to a place, but they get under attack, so they have to find shelter somewhere. Okay, that's the premise. What happens is the gimmick, if you will, of the book
Yeah.
is that every panel will switch between four different eras. So you're gonna have
Huh.
feudal Japan,
Right.
old West, modern era, like maybe 80s, 90s action cop LA or whatever, and
Right.
then on an asteroid in space. And so then the protagonists will change, but their positions and their dialogue will remain the same,
Right.
and their environment, not the environment, but the situational environments
Yeah. Yeah.
will stay the same. And then the protagonists will change. But I said the protagonists, everything will change except
Yeah.
for like geographical locations
Yes.
and the theme and like the plot. So like
Yeah.
for some reason that just hit me out of the blues. I'm like, okay, well, I don't
Actually,
really
pretty
have to
good.
write because the story doesn't matter. It's like how you tell it, right? At that
Yes.
point. So yeah, I don't know. I had another idea. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're the one that's interviewing me.
No, it's fine. Um, so do you ever, and this is a different thing, do you ever get like artist block? I mean, you've been in work for hire for a long time and commissions and all that. Is there ever you sit down with somebody, somebody sent you and you said, I don't know what to draw here. Has that ever happened to you? Or does that even, no? That's
No,
awesome.
it's only because one practice, right? I practice
Yes.
making all these lines. I can just
And,
start.
and we're just talking about if you ever get like artist block with somebody else's project, of somebody else's pages. Could you ever not see what you wanted to do with it?
No, not really. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, so I know kind of
Right.
like it's the rhythm. The only thing I have a problem with is just being motivated to get started, Or sometimes I'll get overwhelmed, and so I have to break it down. I think I had to. I would be lying if I said I didn't. I know there's some parts where I'm just like I don't know how to figure this out, but then I'll just start scratching.
That's what I was gonna say. Do you like
And
doodle and get yourself in the mood to
just
draw?
yeah, just free form, getting the blood pumping, just getting the
Yeah.
motions going. So and sometimes it's all done muscle memory. It's
Yeah.
as simple as just like just doing your panel borders. I mean, that's usually how I start laying down all my pages. I know it's kind of weird, but I'll see the actions and stuff, the shots and like the angles all in my head, and it's just a matter of like, okay, what's the best panel to capture that, and then how can I compose those panels on a page so it reads well. And
Yeah.
so as I'm going through, I don't really do like my first thumbnails are usually just the boxes of the panels,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
then from that, that's my shorthand. And maybe there'll be some scratches in there. Like I usually will do it, but mostly focus on like how I'm going to lay out the pages.
Yes.
And then that sometimes is enough to get it going. Just drawing those simple lines. I just said just starting. Motivation is like the hardest part for me,
Yeah.
and I think maybe a lot of artists because there's so many other things you can do in your house, like your dishes or your rug or cleaning up the table or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so hard to ignore those things and just get to the board. And sometimes when I'm at the board at the table, like I will sit there sometimes and just be like, okay, I don't know how. It's not that I don't know how to start like what I want to do. It's more just like the physical, just like how do I? Because it's sometimes it's like walking uphill. You're just like,
Yeah.
oh, man, this is a 16-hour adventure in front of me, and it's gonna. Sometimes it's a drag. It's a lot. Let me get wrong. It's a lot of fun. My favorite part is composing it and doing it, but doing the actual draftsmanship sometimes that takes me a minute to get motivated to do.
I got you. Well, that makes sense because yeah, I'm kind of the exact
That's the work part of it, right?
right. Right. Yeah, and again, that comes back to the thing we were talking about earlier about how to lay out a page, how to lay out a panel. There's a lot of thought that goes into a comic book that some of these people just come in, hey, I'm going to do a comic. You know what I mean? But to
Right.
bring that artistic kind of thinking about how the reader perceives it, those kind of things. That takes a lot of work, and it's a lot of thought that goes into that. So
and practice and failing.
yes.
I made a lot of mistakes, but also as you're consuming the material, and just look again, like, you can't just read comics if you want to be a comic artist.
Right.
Watch a play. Like I've
Yeah.
been inspired by a great many things, of course, outside of the world of comics. But to learn how to do the craft of it, it's important to read comics and understand like how that structure is. Um, yeah, I mean, I appreciate the guys can just wing it and just bang out whatever. I have this joke that I've erased way more lines that I've drawn. Only because, like, I will fill out a panel and I'll do it and I'll be like, okay, but I'm like, okay, that's not something's not really clicking here. I want to have an impact. I want to change it up. I want the reading flow to be better. If I'm going to do this in this panel, then I have to change this whole huge panel that I did so that this one makes sense because I really like how this one's working. There's a lot of that,
Yeah.
and so I'm constantly erasing, like almost always, and so that's a lot of it too. Is like about getting started on a page. Is you just start making marks, and it's easier just kind of like take those marks away and embellish the ones you want to keep, right?
Yeah. I love that how you said that. I've erased more lines than I've drawn. You know what I mean? That's like saying I've thrown away more shit than I've gave to people because I don't want to put bad shit out there. You know what I mean? Seriously, right?
Brag, but it's totally not. It's more about the odd attitude. It's like
No, and that's but I
think
mean,
it's precious. It's not precious to me. I just want to get
okay.
at the best part of it that I can, and that takes some destruction sometimes.
But you're right. I mean, it's not a humble brag. You know, there you as well as I know. I don't know how much you go and look at what Kickstarter. I don't buy as much as I did. I bought a bunch before we started our Kickstarters to kind of see how the process.
Sure.
But I'll go in there just to read them, see if anything's kind of catching my interest.
Right.
You know, you see the test pages, you see, they give you the synopsis, whatever, the log line, the paragraph of the story, and you're like, yeah, that just doesn't interest me. I see the pages, it looks like it's paint by number. I mean, yeah, if somebody tells me, and I know from seeing your work that it's true, that you've thrown away more stuff than you'd put in front of people, I know why that is. I understand that. I understand this. We're never going to be perfect. Our writing's never going to be perfect. Our art's never going to be perfect. But there's sometimes just like, I'm not putting that out there. It's not, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of people who don't have that regulator to kind of say, if it's not good enough for me, how do I expect somebody else to do it? They'll just throw shit out there.
And that's the thing. I mean, maybe I don't know what kind of comics you're talking about, but I do know the similar type where it's like
Yeah.
it looks really good. It looks great, but there's some sort of stiffness or some sort of like there's not like life in it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's kind and I wonder sometimes, you've heard of the Marvel method, right? They send the very basics to the artist and let the artist.
Which I appreciate. That's my favorite way to work, really. I mean,
Yeah. But the thing is with that is I think what that does negatively is just like we were talking about this paint by number stuff. They see, well, that's how Marvel does it. I can do it. Marvel has these entities that have been around for almost 100 years, 60, 70 years.
True.
People grew up with. They have the name brand. They have the buy-in of people already. They can do that because they can get away with it. And a lot of these younger, newer comic book makers think, well, they do it that way, so I can do it. And it's not going to work that way. And there's probably a lot of heartache with that.
That only comes from when you have put the time into
Right.
to be able to have it's all shorthand is what it comes down to, is what they're really doing.
Yeah.
Just way of doing it. Like your scripts are great because you give me just enough that I need and you allow me the interpretation to kind of like maybe move some things around. As my side of it is more like the physical representation of that has to make sense, right?
Yes. And that's why I think, and I'm super excited with the naughty list because I think it took, again, I'll tell anybody that asks this. I've said it at Comic Cons. My first 4 or 5 was just oversaturated, too much going on, too many panels per page. You even told me this. And getting in the flow of it and getting to where I'm doing stuff now. That's why I'm excited about the naughty list we're doing together, because I kind of see what you see as about just give him enough and take him to where he knows the page needs to be turned. You know what I mean? That kind of thing, where that panel needs to end on that page. And I think I'm better at that. But I think, again, I'm saying this from a place that I went ahead and put the first 4 out there when I knew, looking back on it, I'm like, I love this art. Ben did a great job on 3, but God, I was so lost. And I really feel that.
Right.
And because the artist did such a good job and kind of saved a lot of that stuff, I'm happy about that. But it's just like,
Listen,
I do get that
that's
cringe factor.
on the back, but I actually agree with you on some of those things. There's some parts that I'm like, I really hope that I got this across. Like, I knew what you were going for. It was like, how can I get other people to get on the board too? So I'm glad you did say that, because I felt that happened in a couple of places too. Which, well, again, more than happy to do, because it's that's part of the collaboration. This makes it fun, right?
Right. But it comes back to that thing that, I put it out too soon. I know I did that. You guys did a lot of the heavy lifting, the artists on that 100%. But there's a lot of people who, even if they find a little bit of success at first, they won't look back. It's like, oh, it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I'm like, if you can't see the flaws in your own work, nobody's going to appreciate the
Yeah,
goodness in
well,
your own work, you know?
healthy amount. There's sometimes I get
Yeah.
obsessive over things I've done, but like you can be like, hey man, that's not as good as what I can do. I always quote Ed Wood all the time. My favorite quote is, "My next one will be better." Right? I definitely feel like with a naughty list, I try to do like challenges for each kind of book I do. And it's the only thing more than just probably to keep me engaged, or again, like the gimmicky thing, try to make it exciting. I wanted to do like an
Yeah.
anaglyph 3D kaiju book that's like 11 by 17. And you
Oh
got to
my
put on the
gosh.
glasses, right? I know. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's something I want to do. But like with the naughty list, my goal was one, we're doing like a tribute to the Little Golden Books, right? Which is
Yeah.
part of that. So the aesthetic has to be kind of similar, but also like I've been working in spreads. I'm trying to make things airy, like, and so
Okay.
instead of one panel, and I do this with almost all my comics now, but this one I've been thinking about it a lot in particular, where I'm actually trying to create that across both pages.
Okay.
So you actually get like an image every time you kind of open it in a way. It
That's
doesn't
cool.
exactly work every page turn, but
Right.
there's a couple when they land in the North Pole and they're overlooking the Santa's village there on the cliff. It's all just that's one of my favorite spreads
Yeah. That's a
so
great,
far. But
that is, that's,
but again, like yeah, I'm just trying to think of like I downloaded that I think it's called the Color Mark brush set. So what's really interesting with that set, which I found just because I just wanted it, I thought it looked cool.
yeah.
I started playing around, and if you make a selection, right, and you blast the thing up to the highest point size it can get,
Yeah.
if you can manage to do everything in one pass, like the stroke in one pass, it's these one and even color, but you get all these like pitches of it's like a texture almost where like the
Huh.
marker didn't hit the paper.
Yeah.
So it gave it that kind of that nice storybook effect that I was trying to kind of bring out for the book.
That's all.
So yeah, that's another thing. Artistically, aesthetically, I want it to look like something that people can kind of get, but also be new, like look new and modern, kind of.
Right.
Anyway, I'm having a blast. Again, I thank you for your patience as well,
Oh, no.
because we started this like back in was it September or something?
Something like that. Yeah. But it was, yeah, no worries about that. Like I said, I
Just
mean,
take time, folks. I always underestimate how much time I need, and it's shooting myself in the foot. But
it takes how long it takes. You know what I mean? I mean, if, yeah, no, dude.
it does. But
And
I also feel bad because people,
don't feel
you
bad.
pay, and it takes a long time to get it
You,
done. It's I feel bad, but it's
you,
some people it's an investment, right?
yeah, and you got to see the whole Zen universe thing of it, right? If it didn't make it by this Christmas, it wasn't meant to be on this Christmas. We'll be
That's
more than
true.
twice as
That's so
ready
true.
for the next one. So, yeah,
And it will be ready for the next one. I promise that.
that's what we like to hear. That's
I'm
awesome. Yeah.
literally like I think a week or two away from just getting it all buttoned up. I
Ah,
just again,
no
it's not a thing.
hurries.
I know. I'm not. It's more for my own edification because I just feel
Yeah.
like again, it's that motivation thing where it takes a lot of technical work to make it look that way. Because you can be like, oh, he's just like scribbling across it. I can't even describe what I need to do to make it look that way because
Yeah.
it's just very involved, and I have to like everything's on a new layer. Then I compress. It's just like it's a whole rigid system I put out to make it look like the
How
way I want
you
it to look.
how you want it to look. Yeah.
Which I'm like, or am I torturing myself? I can just do it, like you said. I can just do it like those guys do it and be okay with it. Probably do way better than the other way I'm doing it now, but I can't because I'm neurotic. I have ADHD. Get it done the way I need to get it done.
Well, and a lot of people need to understand that too. I mean, it's a hand in hand collaboration, right? And
For
again, that's
sure.
why I don't like to put too much into. I was too wordy on the first couple of books, like we were talking about, but I don't like to put a lot of panel description. I'll kind of,
Right.
broad stroke it and let the artist fill in the details. When you can find that flow, it really works well. You're either
For
being
sure. I was
trying,
talking to a guy when I was first coming up, and he was writing, and he would try to be very boisterous with the dialogue. It was like a lot of balloons, almost taken up. I had like a half-page spread, and it took up all half of that. And I was like, I said, dude. He goes, well, I just don't want. He goes, I don't want the writing to get like lost. I want people to see what I can bring to it. I'm like, but you're writing the thing. You're writing the whole thing. Like I'm not doing
yes,
anything other than what's based on what you wrote.
yeah,
So the writing's already there. And even if they see a drawing, they're seeing your writing. And it took them a while to kind of like figure out, oh yeah, I guess you're right. I'm like, yeah, it's not hidden. I'm not hiding it from anyone.
right.
And so that's where you have to be confident in your writing and understand that aspect too. It's not people aren't just like know you for the writing of the dialogue. That you like the wrote the whole. I don't know. That was a weird thing he was glommed onto, but hopefully he's over that now. Yeah.
So we talked about the naughty list. We're expecting that around Christmas next year. What about Desslinger? Give me some updates on that.
With Christmas this year?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What?
Will it be Christmas this year? This coming Christmas?
Yeah, right. We're gonna do it 7 months.
Yeah.
Then-
He said
yeah,
next year.
Yeah, December
2024.
25th,
Christmas 2024. Okay.
2024. Yeah, well, let's say that. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Deathslinger is out. I think the pre-orders for Deathslinger are over.
Okay.
Thank you to everybody that got that pre-order. Super, super, super happy for your patronage. I think now I think we did release the statement. So in July, there's going to be a previews that comes out where you can order Deathslinger. We're going to be in Diamonds
Oh, nice.
distributing, and so we're going to be in that preview. So it's for order for the September run of comics. They come out in September. So you can go to your local comic shop anywhere in the country, ask for Deathslinger by name by Cosmic Line Productions, courtesy of Shane Berryhill, Keith Finch, and myself. Yeah, you can get it in September. That was a fun book, dude. I can't describe how much fun I had in that book. I have fun on all the books I work on. I don't think you could ever see me work on a book. I don't know. Maybe if I was held hostage, you'd see the art. The art would look sad. So I'm always excited to work on any book I get a chance to. I'm very, very, very humbled and ecstatic every time I get somebody who wants to work on a book. So yeah, Deathslinger, that's going to be coming out. Got the naughty list. I have a couple other projects, I think, coming out. The Versus book I want to do. The super secret book I can't talk about.
Right.
I've already said too much. But I'm doing it with a really, really stand-up guy who's a stand-up guy in the community. Everybody loves this person. They're a creative force to be, I would say, reckoned with, collaborated with.
Right.
They're amazing. I'm super stoked, looking forward to working on that with them. Something I've never done before. Something I told myself I was never going to do.
Really?
So that's, yeah. Or it's like the form and the content project. It's something I swore I was never ever going to do. But now that was 20 years ago. We're 20 years on from that point that I made that declaration. So I'm definitely turned heel on that. And I'm going full force into it. So that should be a lot of fun. Something that nobody's seen me do before, which I'm excited about. Again, every project, I got to do something I've never done before.
Yeah. So speaking of the death of a soup, what was that process? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I love that project. I have my whole heart's in that project. So I think what had happened was, I know the origin for me, from my perspective. Ruben Omac online, if you guys know him, him and I were doing kind of like a tango. He did this like Doomsday, picture of Doomsday, the character, and I was like, oh, I'd buy the hell of a book. You know, what did I say? Oh, I said, oh, I decided to draw a Superman that matched that Doomsday.
Nice.
So I hit him up. I'm like, it'd be a really fun idea. Is that if you continue to do, like, they're both getting close to each other in this fight. So every time, you do a new picture of Doomsday, I keep on saying Deathslinger. I got the D's stuck in my head now. Every time you see Doomsday, he's a little closer, more angry. And then, like, I'll do Superman. He's, like, angry, more torn up and all fucked up. And then what we can do is a jam piece where they're punching each other out, like in the Death Superman book, and so forth and so on. We did that. And then somebody asked us to join this group where they were making a fan recreation of issue number 75.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's cool. So I picked up my page. I was doing really good. And then I can't remember what happens. I can't remember if it was Mark's idea, my idea. I think Mark actually asked me to do it. He was like, hey, instead of doing that one page, do you think you could do like an intro? Because people might not know the whole lead up. There's a whole like 6-issue lead up through various Superman books, you know, and Justice League and all that, of Doomsday walking from like Ohio to Metropolis and just bashing everything out of his way.
Right.
Superman Metropolis. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. Let me do that. And I was like, well, let me see if I can do it like a grand design type of way.
Yeah.
And I thought that'd be cool because that was the hot thing at the moment, and it's still kind of hot right now.
Yeah.
But it was really on the heels of all that. I think the Hulk grand design had just come out, I think, if I remember right. So we're working on that. I'm doing the 3 pages. I'm researching. I got to find these issues now.
Right.
And I found out about Doomsday because I didn't know anything. I found out his origin story is fucking bonkers. And so, and I'm reading through it. I'm doing the Wikipedia stuff. And then I had this bit of inspiration. So I was like, hey, Mark. I was Mark Darden, who head up that project.
Right.
Beautiful man, good buddy. I was like, I have a crazy idea. What if I do a grand design version of Doomsday's origin in 3 pages at the end of the book? So the last panel would be him crashing the earth, and then you can flip back to the first panel of the book, and it's him busting through the ground. It created this kind of circular kind of momentum thing. Yeah. At first, he was going to do it. At first, he was like, I don't know how it's going to be structured. I totally sounds like a good idea, but I don't know practically if I can get that to happen, because there was all these pieces that were kind of falling in and all that stuff. But yeah, then we did a online kind of group Zoom interview going through the book before print. Right. Yeah, and he did the first 3 and last 3. Awesome. The most satisfying thing for me, because again, another challenge, another grand design kind of thing to do. He did, I think, all the writing for it. And it just, I can't remember how that worked. Maybe I did. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. He only asked me to do a couple things. I only asked for a couple things in return, just to showcase some more of the art that were in pieces, because everything's so compactly close together.
Yep.
But there's some moments that I was really proud of that I did. It was like a sound effect word balloon of like, Doomsday or whatever. The word balloons is like, but it's all slightly covered up. I'm like, can we just move that over just a little bit? Because I'm so proud of how that came out. If you only have space, I mean, I'm trying. The crazy thing is, Doomsday looks cooler the smaller you draw him. It's like the size of a postage stamp at some points in the story. Regardless, though, super great about the project. The only bummer I had about it was when the kayfabe guys who requested it, because they put out the call. That's how the whole thing started, I guess. They were like, hey, they were going through issue 75. That this is so milquetoast. This is so lame. We need the kayfabers to actually come together and like make a fucking bombastic one. They covered one version that somebody else did.
Yeah.
That was a really, really good version. We had like a huge, like 100-page book, and it was all filled with stuff. It was a lot of heart, and a lot of the fan base came up and responded to that call. And I felt it was kind of a little dismissive that they never really covered it, because I, being a fucking parasocial asshole the whole time, thinking these are the two guys who kind of like did the grand design thing, right? One who created it in a way, and the other guy who kind of like followed up to do it and have the torch in a way. I was drawing it for those guys. And I'm like, oh man, I hope they get a kick out of this. I was getting giddy. I'm like, oh man, I really hope they appreciate the stuff I did here, Totally the wrong way to go about any project. I mean, I did a great job on those pages,
Yeah.
but I have to look back on it with a little bit of regret, because I was doing it for almost all the wrong reasons, except for to help my buddies out too. I mean, that was a joy there, and collaborating and doing something I'd never done before. But the end result for me was, I was like, oh, I really hope I get to see this on the YouTube channel. And I really hope because that was a sense of validation, not from professionals, like two professional people that I admire. That would have been pretty cool, because I've been doing this, like I said, subterranean rather, for like 30 years, and like I'm just barely kind of getting popped up, and it would have been really cool just to see all that craft and design and like all that effort, the years I put in, be slightly validated. But I did a Zen thing, I meditated, and I don't need that type of validation. I can validate myself, and I am extremely proud of that project. I'm extremely proud that I got to be in that book with all those other great artists and writers and stuff. So that was the real me for sure.
There you go. Make lemonade out of lemons, man. Right? You know what I'm saying?
I mean, if you get a chance to download it or buy it, I think
I
it's
bought
still
it.
on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I bought it. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that whole thing is great, man. There's some super amazing images in it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like I said, that was from my perspective. It was a collective kind of like, well, shucks, because everybody put a lot of heart. It's such a golden book. It's really, really good, really strong.
Yeah.
But hey, it's in the past. We're moving forward.
That's right. Moving forward. So I want to hear your rant. You preach on this. You talk about it however you want. So
okay. Well, I'm excited.
you see it a lot on Reddit, right? People who want artists to work for free. So give me your
I think
get on the soapbox. Let me know.
Okay, here.
Right. Stand on the soapbox and let me know.
There's people that would say never, right? And I think that when you're just starting out and you're hungry, that's the most appropriate time to do it.
Okay.
I did it. The first gigs I had, I was working with a guy named. So I'm actually not going to give that bastard any fucking credit.
Don't promote. Yeah, don't promote him if you don't want to. That's it.
I don't hate a lot of people, but I don't really hate him. I just feel bad that the relationship ended the way it did. Regardless, having said that, I did a lot of pages for him for free. I mean, I gave him, I think, 2 books. Maybe I was working on the second. Wow. I know I gave him 1 and a bunch of art and a bunch of posters, and I was working on the second one when things. And he was only upset because I auditioned for another thing and didn't tell him. And so they kicked me out of the company.
Oh, wow.
Which was just him not paying me to do art for his book.
Interning or whatever they call that.
There was a trade-off in that situation. So I was young. I was hungry. I'd been in town for a few minutes or years, and I just had my kid. I think I had maybe both of them. I can't remember. Maybe I know I had my daughter at least. Anyway. So this guy's like, oh, yeah, I saw your art at this place, because I was working at a few restaurants, and so I'd always do art for them. They leave them up because they're great. So he's like, oh, yeah, I saw it, and I connected you, blah, blah. He wanted to do a card game at first, but then later pitched the comic, but then said that the card game was a test to see if we would do. So I should have seen that as a red flag. I should have seen that as a red flag already. But he was enthusiastic. His ideas were crazy. He was into this whole like neo trash kind of thing. Euro trash kind of shit. So anyway, the benefit was I got to hang out with a guy who liked comic books. I was getting to create a comic book. I was getting to work on Actually, no, I did do 2 books for him. That's crazy. Okay, I did do two, and I was working on the third. Whatever. I just for my OCD. He would pay for like the badges for us to get to shows. He paid for the table,
Okay.
and most of the time he would take us to them. And a lot of them times are local, but there's a couple that weren't so local. And I'm appreciative of all that. Great
Right.
experience. There was like that was the beginning of my being able to table at cons, and I was able to
Yes.
learn that culture. So great benefit for me. I was a young artist. I didn't need that payment. But then it got to be to where I was looking for jobs that would pay me, and then he got bent out of shape. And I'm like, okay, well, that isn't going to work for me. So I'd say there's a time and place. Know your worth. If you think, especially, I'd say any artist starting out, if you can get a couple shekels, even just bargain like $20 a page, which is kind of like usually good rate for people that's starting out.
Yeah.
And if not, only do a few. There's been
Right.
times where I've done free work for people now, and now it's a matter of like, how do I put this? Okay, it's like a plumber, right? So I'll invest the time to do your art, but I have to have a benefit from it, right? So
Right.
if I'm going to put the time in, the money doesn't pay for the artwork. The money pays for the time for me to not waste, but to utilize to do the art, right?
Right. To take
So
away from your personal life, to take away, that's hours they're borrowing from your life.
right, exactly. So, and have thinking about you and like your response to the piece and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
If I'm gonna put my own time into it, then it's got to be worth it. I need to get either some sort of weird satisfaction of it, or it doesn't matter.
Yes.
But you get to the point where it's like you'll know where to be like, yeah, I can't really. I mean, I have friends that want art from me, and I'm like, well, it depends, like and usually if they go on this whole thing like, oh yeah, I want a 30-foot mural on the side of my boat or whatever, I'm like, okay,
Right.
well, that's
Yeah.
I gotta get some money for that because but if it's like a quick like, hey, can you do a doodle for like my kid's birthday? Like I
Yeah.
can make a card or something. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say generally don't do art for free. But if you're just starting out and you're hungry enough, then that's totally appropriate. I don't see anything wrong with that. I did it, so I can't slam on it.
Yeah.
But you get to 2 years in, maybe you should be getting paid.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said about people who think they're great artists but don't know how to do a comic book, so they don't know how to be great comic book artists. You know what I mean? Like we were talking before about page turns, panel
Sure,
selection,
sure.
all that kind of stuff, panel sizes, consequential panels telling the action that makes sense.
Right, because it's
Just
not just an image-based art, it's a function-based art, it's a product-based art. I mean, all comic book art is production art, and it's
yes.
for the product of moving through the pages of a
Yep.
comic and kind of navigate the physicalities of that and it's not that hard. I have a philosophy.
You say it's not that hard because you've been doing it for 40 years. I mean,
Okay,
that's
so
my
let me
that's my honest.
contextualize why it shouldn't be that hard.
Okay.
If you're an artist and you're a great artist, but you don't know how to do comics, my biggest tip would be end every page on a question and answer that question on the next page at the start.
See, that's great advice, right? I mean, in my opinion, but
Right?
yeah. But see, I think you're leaning too much on your time doing this, because I have seen some
I am
great
biased.
artists. Well, I mean, honestly, you know how you're a great artist and a great comic book artist, but you probably didn't. You might have started off as a great artist, but you probably were not a great comic book artist till you learn, those kinds of things. And I think there's that transition. People think, I draw great, I can do great art. Yeah, well, okay, let me see a story. Tell me a story,
Right.
So
That's exactly fair, and that's
yeah,
exactly why publishers ask for 5-6 pages of consecutive art that they
right.
know the story. Yeah, no, that's so true. Yeah, it takes. That's why again I say if you're just starting out, it's okay to get free work because you're probably going to be doing shitty comics. So
Yeah, yeah, but it's an experience. It's anything. I mean, you don't go out on
exactly.
your first day on welding. You're not doing bubblegum welds, because you're going to be. 'Cause you know what the hell you're doing. So,
No.
yeah, but no, that is 100% fair, and that's kind of the point I was getting to. Just because you do great art and you've done great stills, whatever, don't think that you can just jump right into a comic, because there is an art, and you've got to build that muscle memory. You got to know how to tell a story. This is why comic art is so, I think, above everything else, any other kind of art, because you have to see it as a movie, you have to see it as a still, you have to see each panel as a panel, you have to see each page as a page, and you've got to get from page 1 to page 22 and do it well so that the reader goes along. So
Right.
I think you're taking, as an artist, you take words written on a page that was in somebody's mind, then you got to put that in your mind, then you got to take what's in your mind and put it panels and the pages to put that same movie the writer had into the reader's head. And it's that is a skill. I mean,
That's trippy. That's
I'll
pretty accurate though.
I'll die on that hill, man. I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen the meme where it says, artists, I get paid $100 per page. Colorists, I get paid $50 per page. Letter,
Oh yeah,
and then the writer, you guys get paid, but
that's
that's
a
just
fair
one.
statement. That does happen though, right?
It does happen. It totally does happen. But I'm telling you, the writer, in my opinion, takes second seat to the artist. The writer's got to be able to say that I am the co-pilot. I got to trust that what I put in this guy's head, he can put on the paper to put in other people's heads. So I think
Well,
it's
if
in
you
my
don't drive
mind
it
is
home,
artist one, writer two. you know,
I see where you're coming from. I don't want to say I agree with that necessarily. I think it's kind of like you said, a co-pilotership that they're both right there at the front.
yes,
But I think that if you're a writer and can't draw comics, you automatically have to acquiesce that you needed to have a co-pilot.
yes,
You know what I mean? So that's fair. I agree with that statement. Yeah, it definitely is a trip to think about. I would
yeah,
say that like I always go back to Miller again. Miller's like my dude, right?
yeah,
Back in the day when he the Daredevil movie came out, they did the Men of Fear,
yes,
the extra.
yeah.
If you guys haven't, anybody out there who hasn't, do yourself a favor, spend 15 minutes and watch his interview on that because it's probably like the peak of his powers, right?
Yes.
I mean, he's right there. This is like after Sin City. This is, I think, right. Eloquent speaker, very, very, very poetic, right? But he talks about the difference between movies and comics. He goes, movies can do things that are very, very powerful. They can make you feel things. They can slow down time, but they can. All they need to do is leave a camera running. A cartoonist has to be very, very smart to slow down time in a comic. But that's
Yes.
what makes it sexy. That's what makes them fun. That's what makes them cool. He says at the end, he goes, I got into comics to make them more cinematic. I stayed in comics to make them less so.
Oh,
And I'm like, that's because again, we have strengths. We have the graphic medium, and we can
yes.
play with that graphic medium. That's why I like to put in all the sweat peuds and the
Yeah.
jarns and all these fucking
The
these
thousand
things.
shell casings. Yeah.
Even in the most serious comic, like with Deathslinger, I pulled off a couple where it's like, uh, she just saves these like ladies or robot people from like slave trade, sex trafficking, right? And one android girl comes up and hugs her, and there's like these little hearts, but they have like these little sci-fi rings on the bottom.
Uh,
I'm like, who cares? It doesn't matter. That's the fun of it, right? And that's why I
right.
like comics is that you can inject a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's clever, and that's enough for me.
So have you seen the new Frank Miller movie coming out? I guess I've seen
Oh,
a
I saw
preview.
the ad for the. It's a
Yes.
documentary, right?
Yeah, documentary. Yeah.
Hey, I have a question. I don't. You might know this. What happened to Frank Miller?
You
Did
mean
he?
like physically?
Yeah, did he have a stroke, or was it like
He may, I don't know about the stroke. I know he was an alcoholic for a long time, and I don't know if because I look at that and I see, did he develop that crick from drawing? You know how he's kind of got the neck arm
yeah,
thing?
he's hit that thing, and it's
Yeah.
like,
But
I'm not
yeah,
shaming, just observing. But
yeah.
yeah, because he's my dude, and I'm like, now he looks like that guy that was panhandling gold in like '49 and shit. Like I
Oh
don't know.
yeah, I
Yeah,
know. I'm
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
excited to see it.
I definitely, I'm very excited. He is the only guy I think regret never being able to meet in person.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's even touchable now.
Yeah.
Uh, I met Mike Mignola, and that was great. I met him
Oh, that's awesome.
briefly. But the weirdest thing, it was Rose City Comic Con. It was like a few years ago, I think before COVID. I had to have been before COVID. Anyway, and I had the first issue of Heavy, but the primordial
Yeah.
first issue. So it was I think I called it Defined. It was an 8-page like opener. It was so dumb. If you want to talk about bad comic, that's a bad comic. Anyway, I just had it though, and I was going around with it, and I was selling at the table with my buddy. And I look over this table, and there's like this bald headed dude with glasses sitting there, and nobody. There's no line for him anywhere. I mean, he's from around this area, so maybe it's not a big deal. But
Yeah.
to me, he's like my second dude. He's like his Frank Miller and Mignola. They're both like there. They're my two dads, right?
Right.
He's just sitting there by himself, right? And his documentary just came out about the show that he had in New York, where it's like all like Hellboy art and paintings and stuff. And he does some special art for it. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful documentary. And of course, he's a great guy. So I went down and I knelt down in front of him because I didn't want to stand. I felt weird.
Right.
And I was like, hey, blah, blah. My name's whatever. And, you're a huge inspiration to me artistically and stuff. And this is a comic that I did. I like to give it to you, just, whatever. I don't care what you do with it. Just here you
Yeah.
go. And he opened it and he just went, wow. And that was like it. I was like beyond
Over
the
the
moon.
moon.
I was like, okay, that's it. It was a genuine, just like soft. wow, almost an Owen Wilson wow, but not quite. It was definitely pretty much a Mignola wow. Like, oh, I was like, oh shit, okay, thank you, bud. I just talked to him about the documentary and just left him to his own devices. But I'll never forget
That's
that.
awesome. That is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
They say never to meet
one
your,
just
your
one
heroes,
word.
but
It's the smallest word. I was like that. It's so perfect.
yeah. Hey, that is awesome. So wrapping it up, man. Anything else you want to add? I definitely wanted you to tell us where everybody can get a hold of you, see your art, web pages, instas, all that.
I am one of those stupid jerk artists that doesn't have his own website yet. So you can find me on Facebook. I am on Instagram at BraddyBen, 2 T's, 1 Y. I basically, you can look for books from me under Cosmic Lion Productions. 100% Comics has a couple of my books there. And then Big Cartel has a couple of others. So if you shop any of those places, I'm sure you type in my name and it'll pop up. Other than that, I have a Gumroad that nobody seems to want to go to. I think it's Ben Perkins 76. I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. But if you really want a good book that I did out there, go to Amazon, order yourself Post Traumatic. It's by Pete Fitz. He wrote it. It's a kind of like a World War II revisionist history book, but with dark supernatural powers.
Oh, nice.
And it's like a legacy thing. Well, again, one of the coolest books I've worked on. It was all black and white, all real dark stuff. It used to be called
Cool.
Dark Matters, but because of the war stuff, we decided to call it Post Traumatic, which is what it was really about. So, that's a good book. Unfinished, unfortunately, but that one first volume is there and it's golden. I have a hardcover of it on my shelf.
Oh,
So, and anywhere else, yeah, I mean, just find me on Facebook, hit me up, man. I just closed my commissions list because I had to.
getting busy.
But hey, hit me up if you guys have any art. I'll do art for you.
To learn more about Between Two Panels, MNL Comics, or the Immortalis Comics series, go to mnlcomics.com or check out MNL Comics or Tam Immortalis on Facebook. Between Two Panels is a proud member of the Comic Zone podcast family.